Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we're looking at Cardano again, and in this video mainly we're going to be looking at the Bitcoin pair with Cardano, but of course we're going to give a quick breakdown of what we've seen with the US dollar chart as well, and that's what we're starting off with today. So getting straight into it, we can see recently Cardano's price action hasn't been great. We had this really good rally at the start of the year that brought Cardano up to the highs of about 81 cents. But since then, we've lost about 50%, dropping down to 41 cents today and wicking to 40 cents. And we can see that at this 40 cents level, we've kind of come here quite often. We found a rejection here before, back at the start of 2023 in January time, when we had the Santa rally. We also got rejected there again, not soon long after. We wicked back up to that level, got rejected again, and this is also where we had a bit of resistance at the start of this initial move that brought us up to these highs of 81 cents. We can see we spent about 4 weeks floating around the 40 cents level before we finally broke above, moving up to like 68 cents. So pretty important level. It's obviously a strong support, but if we break below that, which is very possible, and personally what I think is probably going to happen, it'll be tough for Cardano to get back above 40 cents in my opinion. But we're not there yet, and fingers crossed it could be up only from here, but I think that's a very foolish way to think. If we take a look at what kind of happened before and we compare these two moves, so we can see we come down to this low after the bull run and after our bear market, we put in our cycle low, we put in a cycle low, and then we make a move to the upside, which we see here. Of course, these two compare, these two circles. We get a first one which is slightly lower than the second. Now in this cycle we had a bit more of a stronger move, but still basically the same thing. And then after this, what we saw was basically another retracement down to these lows, which last cycle was at about 3 cents. This cycle it seems to be about 25 cents. Now there's a good case to be made for this, because you can kind of look at it at how many times you touch this low. And here this cycle we've already been down here 3 times, and last cycle you could argue we came down to these lows about 3 times. So if you believe in the left translated cycle, you're kind of arguing that we're looking at the lows. We came down to this low 3 times, and now we've rallied up. And here you can see we came down to this low 3 times, and when we rallied up, we basically went into bull run. And of course, we started this bull run much sooner than last cycle, because last cycle we started this bull run just before the halving, the Bitcoin halving, and then this cycle we obviously kind of started rallying up much sooner. There's a good case to be made for both, but I personally think we're in a right translated cycle, which is what this kind of suggests. If this is going to play out again, we can see in 2019, in a 4-year cycle, should map to 2023, plus 4 years basically. And we should see a somewhat similar type of move play out. However, if we go to 2023, we can see we didn't really get that. Again, you can argue that we did get that. We got this top, this second higher top, this top, second higher top, and then a retracement, another rally back up and down, another rally back up and back down, and then off into our bull run. But for me, these time zones, these lengths of time just didn't line up. The rallies weren't really that impressive. It was 25 cents to a high of 46 cents, so just under a 2x. And for me, in crypto, a mini bull run, it kind of needs more. This was more along the lines of what I thought we would see. And if you look at these, I think they look a lot more similar in terms of the proportion of the move and the time frames. We can see we rallied up for 29 weeks this first cycle. This current cycle, or the one just gone, we went up for 26 weeks, and now we're currently in this sort of downtrend for the last 25 weeks, or we had 25 weeks last cycle. So far we're living up to that pretty well. We've got another little while of potentially downward movement, and I wouldn't rely on this move here happening. I think this was COVID, and I wouldn't rely on seeing another move like this, but it could very well play out. And I've left these dots here as just like an indicator, but I ultimately think we will kind of be looking at December time, which is when we see these 3 arrows expire, these 3 time frames pass. Once we have seen those pass, like we did last cycle, I think then we're in for our bull run. And if that is the case, again, we're expecting to sort of bottom out beginning of December, and then we're putting in our high, in May of 2026, mid-May of 2026, which isn't too dissimilar in terms of month, where in 2023 we got our high in August, but it's definitely a spanner in the wrench in terms of the 4-year cycle. And what this kind of implies afterwards is, you could say the 4-year cycle will just realign, but we'll have our bull run from 4 years plus of 2026, or that's when we'll get our peak. Or you can say that it might just continuously keep expanding and growing out in the length of time, like it has this last cycle. This last cycle has basically been a spanner. It's been kind of unseen, excluding Bitcoin's kind of first few years where anything happened, really. So having said that, had a look at the US dollar chart, let's take a look at the Bitcoin pair. Now, two cases that I want to present to you today, both of them very compelling. And to be honest with you, I look at them both and I can't deny either. They both work really well. And the two cases is that we're in a left translated cycle, which if we follow this type of a movement here, if we're following this pattern, we're in a left translated cycle. If we see that play out in today's time, we're in a left translated cycle. Or if we're in a right translated cycle, and if we see this move play out, we're in a right translated cycle. Potentially. Nothing is a guarantee, but it would be more likely that we're in a right translated cycle if that plays out, and the same with the left. So having a look at what we've seen so far with Cardano. Again, in October, we had this strong move up, and on the Bitcoin pair, we saw about a 2x. This wasn't unusual. The whole altcoin space did this. So this is a good sign, but kind of shortly afterwards, where we kept seeing the US dollar charts go up, and we saw this basically until February, the Bitcoin chart started to falter and really started to capitulate as the new year went on. And now, of course, we're 6 months into this year, and we've only had about 4 green weeks in 6 months on the Bitcoin pair, which to me is pretty bleak. But with all bleak news, there's always a silver lining. This kind of suggests, hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, that that trend will hopefully change soon. And it can change for a more short-term bullish way, or it can change for a more long-term bullish way. Now, the more short-term bullish way is the left translated cycle. So if we've seen this move here, equivalent to this move from this low to this high, is the same as this low to this high, we can see the percentages don't line up, because from here it's a 99% move, and from here to here we saw a 96%. So this is going to be much greater. This is going to be more akin to a 4x basically, instead of a 2x like we've seen here. So the initial move doesn't line up. However, a nice compelling piece of circumstantial evidence is that we topped out at basically the exact same price, literally the same resistance, and that was at 16,000 satoshis. We didn't go above 16,000 satoshis, and we just came right up to it each time. And from there, we traded down. Now, the first kind of discrepancy is, if you take a look at the time zones, from where we bottomed out, we bottomed out about 23 weeks after this high, but you can see we had a lot of choppy waters as early as week 17. And if we take a look here, we can see we've had 18 weeks from this high. We've had much longer than 18 weeks from this high, and we've had no kind of choppy waters. It's just been straight down. And we have gone further than 23 weeks now. So you could argue that this is the low. We're at week 26. You can say this is the low. This is where we turn around. But for me, I don't get that vibe. Again, we've been following this resistance pretty sharply. And if you are going to assume that we're playing out the same way as this one, the one that suggests the left translated cycle, you can expect a drop of 68%, which would bring us down to 500 sats, which is, from our current price of 620 sats, still another 20% drop on the Bitcoin pair. I think that's pretty possible. And to be honest with you, whichever scenario happens, I think another 20% drop is on the table. So just saying it now, either way, I think Cardano short term is going to keep experiencing bad price action. So pretty good. A lot of things lining up, a few things not lining up, like time frames and the price action that we kind of see as that goes on. But generally, zooming out, a pretty good comparison. A lot of similarities lining up, a lot of things suggesting that this could be true. Now, if we take a look at the right translated cycle theory, and again, so you know my bias, this is the one I think is most likely to play out. We can see that we make this initial move from a low to a high of about 86%. This is much more similar to the move that we saw before, this sort of move from a low to a high, then a trend down, because this one, we move up from a very low low to a very high high, and that equates to a 4x. Here we're getting just under a 2x. Like we did here, we're getting just under a 2x. Now, we don't have the same resistance that we did with the left translated cycle theory, but we do have kind of a trend down that looks a lot more similar. And it, basically a straight line down, very few green weeks. What have we had for this year? again, a very straight line down, not very many green weeks at all. So that one looks more similar in terms of actually taking each week and comparing each week to each week. These two look a lot more similar. Now, in terms of where we could drop after this, last cycle we saw a 77% drop. If we have a 72% drop, we'll go down to basically ADA's all-time lows on the Bitcoin pair, and bringing it down to a 77, we are basically returning to launch prices of about 350 sats. I don't know if it'll go this low. It definitely could. Nothing is off the table, but again, I think it's foolish to assume something will play out exactly the same way. If we take a look at kind of where we put in our first low after moving from this high, you can see it was 18 weeks. This guy, same thing here, obviously doesn't line up because we've been trending down basically ever since then and after then. But if we see how long we kind of took to put in our final low, we can see that was 51 weeks, and that looks a lot more plausible in terms of, what we've been seeing, because we are now, if we take from the high to our current week, again, 26 weeks in, you could argue halfway there in terms of time-based capitulation. You could argue another, 40% drop, 50%, 42% from this low to a potentially similar percentage move low. There's a lot of ways you can look at it. And again, you can completely disregard this if you want and go, no, I think it's left translated cycle. I think this is what's happening. Either way, both cases are suggesting at least short-term downward movement against Bitcoin. And both also kind of suggest that whenever we're going to get our next bull run, if you will, whether you think it's this move that's coming up next or this move that's coming up next, you're going to know about it really quickly when it comes, because we'll be jumping. In both cases, in the space of 3 weeks, we'll be jumping 76% and moves 100% in 3 weeks. You will know if the bottom is in, I think, to be honest with you, because like we've seen before, crypto will just blow up. You know what I mean? Stuff will just green candle to the moon type stuff. So again, I think it's more important to just buy at prices that you're comfortable with. A DCA strategy often long-term outperforms the market. Again, like if you've been holding Bitcoin this whole time and want to move into Cardano, you've done really well because you're now at kind of the lows. You're definitely at the lows. Cardano is currently at 620 sats. The lowest it went last cycle, the lowest weekly close it had last cycle was 440 sats. You're less than 200 sats away from kind of the lows that have been confirmed before. And just for kind of reference, the last cycle highs, not even the all-time highs, but the last cycle highs were 6,200 sats. So if you buy now and it does return down to these lows, but it also returns to these highs, are you really going to be kicking yourself over missing out on that value of 200 sats? Whereas if it does go up from here now, or you think you're believing in the right translated cycle theory like I am, you're waiting till it drops down to the 77%, but it's actually the left translated cycle theory, it drops down to the 68, so you don't buy any Cardano with your sats and it rockets up and you miss out on all this value. I personally would be kicking myself there. So I think it's kind of good to hedge both ways. That's why I think DCAing can't hurt. But again, that's totally your decision. It's your money. Don't let anyone tell you how to spend it, and only spend money that you can afford to spend, Don't spend the rent money on Bitcoin and Cardano. But you guys already know that. So hopefully you found today's video interesting. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Also, click the video up here. It's probably here. Could be here. Either way, please click the video and consider following me on Twitter/X, or check out the Reddit. I'm going to be working on that more regularly now and putting up stuff. So for those of you that have followed, because a few of you have, very grateful, I will actually be doing stuff on there and engaging with you guys a bit. So thanks very much, guys. Take care and peace.